We're turning the page to chapter titled The Power to Perceive from the book titled Self-Development, A Handbook for the Ambitious by Addington Bruce. It is in the public domain. The Power to Perceive. Now let us turn to another mental activity of success-winning significance, perception. The greater the use and control of the sense organs whereby things are perceived, the richer will be the stock of ideas stored up in the subconscious to reward their possessor when he seeks to profit from contemplation, reasoned thinking, or the exercise of imagination. Keenness of perception, ability to use one's eyes and ears and other sense organs to advantage, is indeed fundamental to mental efficiency in general. And perception power depends to a far greater extent than most people appreciate on the general mental trend and attitude of the one perceiving rather than on the mechanical excellence of his sense organs. If, for example, a person inclines habitually to take things for granted, he is sure to be a poor observer, hence more or less deficient in power of perception. For the habit of taking things for granted puts the senses off guard, no less than the reasoning faculty. Under its influence, things are seen not as they really are, but as one takes it for granted they must be. One of the principal reasons for the universality of frequency of illusions is the unfortunate prevalence of this habit of taking things for granted. Moreover, since the mood of the moment is a powerful factor in determining what one shall take for granted, it follows that the selfsame object may at different times be the basis for different illusions. Walking home in the moonlight along a strange road and being somewhat nervous for the safety of a large sum of money that is in your pocket, you are startled to behold on the roadside just ahead of you a man standing in a threatening attitude. Perhaps you instantly seek safety by flight. Perhaps, being of sterner stuff, you take another look. Then you perceive that your supposed man is in reality the stump of a tree. It is so distinctly a stump that you marvel you could ever have been deceived into taking it for a man. Some time later, again, having occasion to be out late, you're passing over the same road. Now you're not thinking of thieves, but you are a trifle nervous and disturbed in mind because of a strange story of supernatural happenings recently told to you or read by you. To your amazement, a ghostly form unexpectedly appears, its whole bearing one of menace. You take to your heels or you courageously advance according to your makeup. If you decamp, you may have a wonderful tale to tell of pursuit by a roadside ghost. If you advance, your ghost is at once changed into the stump which had previously been seen as a highway robber and the location of which you had forgotten. In both instances, you had been deceived because of your habit of taking things for granted. You were in a state of mind that caused you, consciously or unconsciously, to expect to see something out of the ordinary. The tree stump was sufficiently like a human being to answer this expectation, and at once you took it for granted that your fears had been realized. Knowledge of the extent to which illusions are thus caused is of more than theoretical importance. It should have the practical effect of surprising us, on the other hand, to try to develop keener observational powers, and on the other, to mental training that will foster a counter habit of forming judgments on the basis of reason rather than of impulse and mood. Similarly, it is of more than theoretical importance to know that the general state of one's mental development profoundly affects the power to perceive. A man of undeveloped mind will always see far less than one whose mind has been developed by education and experience. And as between two men of developed mind, what each will see depends always on the kind of training his mind has received. You can test this for yourself by a simple and most interesting experiment. Take 2 or 3 friends and go with them for a walk in a park or along a country road. While walking, call their attention to nothing in the way of objects to be seen, but chat casually about a variety of topics of general interest. Then set down on paper what you yourself have seen during the walk and ask your friends to do the same. Comparing the accounts, it is safe to predict that you will find some astonishing differences. Your own training, perhaps, has been such as to make you what is known as practical-minded. In this case, your account may emphasize such things as the character of the road over which you have walked, the richness or poverty of the surrounding country, the thrift or thriftlessness of the people whose homes you have passed. Your friend A, of more aesthetic mental development, may have seen nothing of this, but he has seen much that you have missed: the colors of the sky, the shape of the clouds, the beauties of roadside, meadow, and distant forest. If perchance he has seen the houses that have so impressed you because of their evidences of poverty or prosperity, he will describe them, not in the terms you have used, but in terms of their picturesqueness or the reverse. Friend B's account differs again from yours and A's. A naturalist by training, his narrative of the walk you 3 have taken is full of allusions to plants, insects, birds, and little animals quite unseen by you and A. All 3 of you will probably feel chagrined at the degree of blindness revealed in each. All 3 should draw from the experiment a useful hint as to the desirability of increasing visual power by further mental development along the lines in which weakness has been disclosed. The secret of open eyes, rightly exclaims Charles C. Peters, is a well-stored soul. What you have got in the past, and every iota of it, will affect your mode of perceiving for all the future. Read, look, listen, reflect. Broaden your interests. Refuse to glide into a mental rut. Gain information from every possible source and on all sorts of subjects. This is at once the way to grow in knowledge and to grow also in power to see the world round about. To be sure, much may be done by systematic self-training in observation. A striking proof of this is found in the case of the Houdins, the celebrated conjurers, one of whose most impressive feats, alleged mind-reading, depended for its success on the rapidity and accuracy with which a large number of objects could be observed. This is the way they prepared for it. The elder Houdin first put down a single domino and asked his son to name the total number of spots on it without counting them. Then 2 dominoes were used, then 3, then 4, and so on. After a time, both father and son found it possible at one glance to name correctly the number of points on as many as 12 dominoes. Meantime, they further developed their observational ability by another means. Every day, they made it a practice, when walking along the street, to cast an attentive glance into some store window containing a great variety of objects. One glance was all they gave, after which, walking out of sight of the window, they would write down on a pad all they had seen. Then they would return to the store to verify their enumeration. Unbelievable as it may seem, at the end of a month, the younger Houdin was able to observe 40 different objects at a single glance, and his father 30. Something of the same sort might well be done by all of us, and it is especially to be recommended to parents as an aid in the education of their children. Though, after all, the important thing always is to stimulate and broaden the interests. Interest quickens perception even as it quickens the imagination. The more interested one is in anything, the more likely will he be to perceive not only that thing itself, but also other things in relation to it. If, in addition, he is of an inquiring turn of mind, alert to ponder causes as well as perceive effects, his perceptions, even of things trivial in themselves, may have a far-reaching consequence. Consider for a moment the story of Vincent and the cat. Resting from his labors one summer day, Vincent stood gazing idly out of his study window. Nearby he saw a cat sunning itself on the roof of a shed. As he watched, the cat happened to rise and move a little in order to get out of the shadow cast by a house wall. A few minutes later, the cat again moved, as the advancing sun lengthened the shadow. Amused and at the same time in a questioning mood, the scientist continued to watch the cat. A third, a fourth, and yet a fifth time he saw it changing position to keep in the sunlight. He noted its attitude of complete relaxation, its evident feelings of contentment. The thought occurred to him, it must be that this cat is getting something out of the sunlight of great benefit to it. Would human beings get the same thing? Thus, the story goes, originated the work of Vincent, the famous light cure specialist. It is a typical instance of what is so often termed knowledge by chance. And, undeniably, chance played a part in Vincent's notable discovery, just as it has played a part in many other discoveries and inventions. The names of Newton, Daguerre, Galileo are three of the many that come thronging to remembrance in this connection. Yet, it is important to appreciate, in the instance under discussion, chance did not play nearly as big a part as that played by Vincent himself. Hundreds, nay, thousands of other men had seen cats basking in the sun. It remained for Vincent to raise the practical question of a cat's passion for sunlight. So with Newton and the falling apple, Galileo and the swinging lamp. Chance alone, that is to say, is not sufficient, is never sufficient to effect a scientific discovery or create an invention. In the absence of a keen, inquiring-minded observer, chance could operate to doomsday without producing such a result. As Professor Mack has put it, with reference especially to accidental inventions, quote, in all such cases, the inventor is obliged to take note of the new fact. He must discover and grasp its advantageous feature and must have the power to turn that feature to account. End quote. And thus, as truly it may be affirmed that chance is operating all the while to make discoveries and inventions possible. Only, alas, the right kind of observers are not sufficiently numerous, nor will they ever be unless men are trained more generally than at present to exercise their perception power, and particularly to keep questioning themselves about the things they perceive. In fact, they should be trained to go through life in much the spirit of the small boy who so greatly amused you in the streetcar the other day by the persistence with which he plied his mother with questions. He wanted to know the why of everything, why there are clouds in the sky, why the birds sing, why stones are hard, why snow melts, why people wear spectacles, why fire burns, why he has to go to school, and so forth and so forth. He seemed fairly bursting with curiosity regarding the complex world round about him. You sympathized with his hard-pressed mother. You were not surprised when she somewhat sharply told him not to ask so many questions. Approvingly, you called to mind the adage that children should be seen, not heard. Nevertheless, there is another side to this matter which it will be well to remember. If a child's instinctive questioning is too insistently and persistently checked, he is pretty sure to lose all interest in the why of things. And this is one of the greatest misfortunes that can befall him. It means that he is likely to grow up mentally inert rather than mentally vigorous. in which case he will be content to let others do his thinking for him, and consequently will always be excelled by others. Confronted by any problem, he will look for a ready-made solution. His mental gaze will be fixed on effects and seldom turned to causes. As a result, he will tend to lead a mechanical, routine, unreflective life marked by mediocrity of achievement. This, you are well aware, is the state in which not a few men find themselves. They go along day after day, getting nowhere in particular, doing nothing remarkable, mayhap finding it uncommonly hard to gain a sufficient living. And this largely because their parents early broke them of the habit of asking why. For the fact is that no one can attain any great degree of success in life without being, to a considerable extent, a why man. The more he is a why man, the greater the likelihood of his progressing far himself and notably promoting the world's progress, as Robert Grimshaw truly observes in his Personal Efficiency. Quote, "It is the why men like Newton, Franklin, and Harvey who discover the law of gravitation, the identity of electricity and lightning, and the circulation of the blood." End quote. Perhaps you yourself are not a why man. Perhaps your parents, like so many parents, made the unfortunate mistake of chilling the curiosity which was given to you as an energizing force in your life's unfoldment. In that case, I shall not be surprised to find you frankly dissatisfied with your accomplishment to date. But happily, it still is possible for you to avail yourself of the dynamic aid of the why habit. If only you will, you can get back into the old questioning attitude of your early childhood. In especial, you can ask yourself and earnestly seek to answer the why of your own difficulties in life, the why of others' triumphs. All about you, even within yourself, in proportion as you cultivate your powers of observation, analysis, and synthesis, are sources of information to help you answer correctly the questions you ask. And presently, energizing yourself through the aid of this invaluable why habit, you will forge ahead at a rate you perhaps had never thought possible to you. End of chapter. Stay here in this video as we will get on to the next chapter. Please do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. So far, what is it that you like about this last chapter? And let's turn the page to the next chapter titled, To Develop Willpower. Personal application of many of the foregoing suggestions presupposes, of course, the possession of a considerable willpower. But herein you possibly feel that you must confess yourself deficient, which is after all not surprising, for the will is continually beset by enemies, not all of which you may now recognize as such. One subtle and not always recognized enemy of the will is bodily weakness. Anything that lowers the muscular and nervous tone has a tendency to impair the willpower. For this reason, it is imperative, in order to help oneself gain or keep a strong will, to put into practice the fundamental principles of hygiene. Thus, many men weaken their wills by eating too much, by exercising not at all, by sleeping too little, by denying themselves a sufficiency of fresh air. All these hygienic indiscretions affect the digestion, circulation, etc. This means that they lower the quality of the brain's nutrition. As a consequence, the will, in common with the reasoning power, is harmfully affected. Inactivity, physical or mental, is another potent enemy of the will. The idler is inevitably weak-willed, if only because he is an idler. For effort, energetic effort, is indispensable to continued well-being of the whole organism. And energetic effort is precisely the thing most disliked by the indolent. Wherefore, wealth must be listed among the forces that often undermine willpower, as more elaborately stated by the observant Dr. Robert S. Carroll. Quote, "Wealth, plenty, The unwise provisions of ancestry have removed from the lives of too many the necessity for special effort or sacrifice. And so, in the midst of affluence and surrounded by the richest of opportunities, many will-less, spineless imitations of manhood and womanhood develop. Absence of effort means absence of will, and the absence of will too frequently makes impossible the effort directed by reason, and thus a vicious circle may be established. End quote and footnote from The Mastery of Nervousness. Although there are distinctly psychic enemies of the will, fear is one of these. Through unwise training in early life, many people are continually beset by fears of all kinds. They allow themselves even to fear irrationally, and in the grip of their fears are absolutely incapable of exerting willpower. Such people need special treatment as truly as those physically ill. They need treatment to banish their haunting dreads and give reason an opportunity to open the door for the will development they so painfully lack. Self-pity, too, is a dire enemy of the will. When a man begins to pity himself, whether for bodily maladies, financial reverses, or whatever it may be, that moment he puts a blight on his willpower. For the attitude of self-pity is essentially the attitude of surrender, and with surrender, effort ceases. Footnote. For a more detailed discussion of the effects of self-pity, see the chapter To Profit from Defeat. Self-indulgence likewise must be rated among the worst of all enemies of the will. The self-indulgent scarcely know the meaning of the word sacrifice. Yet without sacrifice, willpower cannot be maintained. Again, I call on Dr. Carroll to bear testimony. Quote, "The whole story of human and personal progress is an unmitigated tale of denials today, denials of rest, denials of repose and comfort and ease and pleasure, that tomorrow may be richer." End quote. Accordingly, for the development and conservation of willpower, this formula may be suggested. Practice personal hygiene, keep actively at work, think courageously, avoid self-pity and self-indulgence, practice self-denial. Thus, you most surely can safeguard your will against its many enemies. And remember, furthermore, that if you want a strong will, you should treat your will precisely as you would any part of your body that you wanted to develop. That is, exercise it. If your will really is flabby now, you may be sure that it is flabby for much the same reason that the muscles of your arm are flabby. When you were young and athletic, you engaged daily in games that kept your arms actively employed. You wrestled, you boxed, and played baseball. Perhaps you went in for gymnastic exercises. Your arm muscles were strong enough then. But when you grew older and took up a sedentary occupation, you gradually dropped the games you had once enjoyed. Every year you made less and less use of your arms, so that now, whenever you are called upon to employ them vigorously, as in moving trunks or chopping wood, you are surprised at the weakness you find in them. Perhaps you regard it as a condition inevitable with advancing years, a condition for which nothing can be done. Nevertheless, it is possible for you once more to build up your arm muscles by systemic exercise. Only you must take care to exercise them a little at a time, and not to expect too much from them at once. Otherwise they will rebel and may inflict upon you aches and pains, causing you to abandon all further attempt to strengthen them. A similar precaution should be taken when it is a question of developing your willpower through exercise. Many weak-willed men, becoming suddenly alive to the importance of gaining strength of will, make the mistake of demanding too much from the will they have hitherto been using scarcely at all. They form resolutions which, in view of their temperament and past history, would call for Herculean willpower on their part. Not being a moral Hercules, they soon break their resolutions. Whereupon they're disgusted with themselves. They bitterly reproach themselves for their weakness of will. Perhaps they make another attempt, only to fail. Perhaps they decide that it is useless to try to develop the willpower they so conspicuously lack. They would have far better results if they began by putting comparatively light burdens on their will. Each day, let them set themselves to do some one thing, perhaps walking to the office or abstaining from smoking until a certain hour of the day, contrary to their habitual inclinations, but not too severely in conflict with these. After a time, when they have proved to themselves that their will can hold fast to a single undertaking, let them give it a couple of tasks to perform. They may agree with themselves, for example, to eat more abstemiously throughout the day and to give more attention than usual to their work. In this way, the will may slowly but surely be trained to respond almost automatically to any demand made upon it. Only one must also be careful to direct it aright by making worthy demands on it, which means that one must have worthy desires. And this brings us to what is, after all, far and away the most important element in the will problem, the relation between wishing and willing. Wishing and willing are, of course, not the same thing. There is a great difference between them, but also there is a far closer connection than most people suspect. Willing is to a remarkable extent dependent on wishing. What a man wills to do is chiefly a result of what he wishes to do. More than this, his ability to do what he wills to do is itself largely a product of his wishing. Wishing, when intense enough, breeds power. "I wish I were a great inventor like Edison," says a young man to himself. "I wish I could discover how to turn electricity to new uses and make machinery that no one else has thought of." But alas, his wish is little more than a passing idea. It is not dwelt upon, sedulously cherished. Certainly, it is not nearly so intense as other wishes this same young man fervently entertains, notably, let us say, to wish to play rather than to work. To wish to play, being stronger than the wish to invent, being, for that matter, stronger than any other wish he has, motivates his will. If it be intense enough, it may develop in him astonishing playability along some special line. Perhaps it will make him an expert bridge player, perhaps a marvel at billiards, perhaps a prodigy in golf. But observe what happens if the wish to invent is really dominant in the heart of this young man. At once he wills to apply himself unremittingly to the study of electricity and machinery. He puts his whole mind into this, thinks of it constantly, and after a while, all unawares, he becomes creatively observant. He may not develop into an inventive genius in the class of Edison, but given only a sufficiently intense wish, he is tolerably certain, through study and reflection, to get surprisingly satisfactory results in his chosen field of effort. Take again the case of a functionally nervous invalid. "I wish I were well like other people," laments this unfortunate person. "I wish I did not have to lead a helpless, useless existence." This is a natural wish. But how strong a wish is it? Is it, in fact, stronger than the opposite wish to continue in a state of nervous invalidness for sundry real or fancied advantages that nervous invalidism brings? Such advantages, for example, as freedom from responsibility for self-support, exception from tedious duties, the assurance of loving care from relatives, the flattering attention of eminent physicians. Everything depends on the particular wish that is dominant in the nervous invalid's heart. If the health wish rules, if it becomes an ardent longing, then the will to be well will truly function. Means of getting well will be studied and conscientiously applied. The shackles of despair will be thrown off. The entire organism will be energized. And presently, the nervous invalidism will be no more. In other words, education of the will is at bottom education of the desires. Wise guidance in wishing means real accomplishment in willing and doing. If only parents and teachers clearly appreciated this, what a different, better world we should have. Too generally, far too generally, Is it held that the great aim in the upbringing of children should be the training of the reason, whereas in truth, it should be the training of the desires, and through the desires of the will. You must teach a child how to will well, how to wish right, before you can expect him to profit from intellectual instruction. For if you omit the preliminary training of the will, he is altogether likely to be dominated by wishes that will interfere with his mental development. He may wish to be idle in the fields all day, instead of wishing to go to school. If then you force him to go to school, shove textbooks into his hands, and compel him to read them, you need not be surprised if you fail to make a good scholar of him. That can be done only by contriving to substitute a wish to study in place of the wish to idle. Once you have succeeded in doing this, once you have inspired in him a sufficiently strong desire for knowledge, he will study eagerly enough and will profit from his studies as he would not otherwise do. It is the same at every period of life. The man who leads an honest, upright life is simply a man who has learned to wish right. The criminal, on the opposite, is a man who has never learned this and has habitually wished wrong. His wishing is short-sighted, selfish, antisocial. To put the matter picturesquely, in the language of eminent European moralists, quote, "What are the springs that cause us to act? They are the sentiments, and nothing but the sentiments. Whatever we may do, we always act under the dominion of sentiments, good or bad, strong or weak, durable or fleeting. The sentiments are reducible to two in number, desire and fear. The former urges man forward and incites him to seek that which he desires. The latter holds him back and makes him recoil from that which he fears. I go further and say that man has never had but a single motive of action, desire, whether it be a positive desire that something happen or a negative desire that something do not happen. Examine from this point of view all your actions and those of your fellow man, and you will always find the single spring setting in motion all your energies." End quote. Footnote. Paul Dubois, Reason and Sentiment. Hence the importance of wishing right. Hence also the importance of frequent self-analysis to determine the character of the wish underlying any definite line of conduct. Rest assured that if your life is motivated by unworthy wishes, your will be directed to unworthy ends. And if you wish the unworthy intensely, you will find your will working strongly to realize your wrong desires, which suggests that what you now regard as weakness of will may actually be only a will misdirected. Certainly there is ample evidence that whenever a man so desires a thing that its gaining become an obsession with him, he tries with all his might to obtain it. As regards it, he exhibits no weakness of will whatever. He studies, he plans, he slaves. He overrides obstacles. He refuses to acknowledge defeat so long as the wish to obtain dominates him. This even when the realization of his wish is sure to be hurtful to him. Take, for example, the case of the so-called dipsomaniac, the chronic and excessive drinker of intoxicants. At no matter what cost or sacrifice, he must have the alcohol which he craves. He has his heart set on that above all else. To obtain it, he will even undergo physical suffering of an extreme sort. A story is told of one inebriate who, unable to gratify his craving in any other way, drank the alcohol in which laboratory specimens were preserved. Another deliberately mutilated himself in order to get the stimulant he hoped would be prescribed for him. We do not often witness anything like such fervor as relates to the winning of success. Nor, for that matter, should one permit oneself to become obsessed even as regards so worthy an end as success. But ardently one must long for success if one is to will and to work efficiently for it. And how is such a longing, such a productive wishing to be developed? By the methods already recommended for the development of interest. Out of interest wishing grows, and as interest is enhanced, so is desire kindled. End of chapter. All right, hope you're enjoying this. Please do hit that like button. Let's scoot over to the next video where we will learn about your memory. What does that have to do with self-development? I'll meet you there.